Hey guys, so here's another video of mine regarding the Assassin Guide. This time around, I'm not going to display the rotation again, more like skill utilities and some little information regarding different skills that you might not know, and which might change your opinion regarding different skills that you used before, and might make you change your skill build overall for the Assassin. Um, so I'm going to cover or try to cover all the important skills for the assassin and the information that you need to know, and basically telling you why I went with the different skills that I have in my skill build. So when we start off with open wound, in comparison to slowing strike, we have 129% of attack as damage, which is of course less than the one you have in slowing strike, but since it only has 5 seconds cooldown, you're refreshing open wound and your rotation anyways, you basically have like exactly 100% more damage than slowing strike as the base damage. And if you look at the dot, it's 13.3% of attack for 10 seconds every second, while here it's only 6, so we have more than double the damage also for the dot. So overall you're doing more damage with open wound, which makes this skill the better option for PvE. Here it's just the additional effect of the attack speed, which you can't even use, the attack speed decreasement, which you can't even use on bosses in PvE. So this is the obvious PvP skill that you want to skill. Then the next row, we have one of the famous and more debatable options for the assassin, which is Hemorrhage and Draining Dagger. So why did I pick Hemorrhage and why did I not pick Draining Dagger? It's pretty simple. The question that we have here is pretty much if you want to go for more DPS or if you want to go for more survivability. If you compare both dots on their own, like I made pretty much like a chart where you can see like the different stats and the different attack that you dish out with every second, covering over 20 seconds for both the dots. And in any regard, Hemorrhage is dealing more damage overall, that's for sure. And even without the passive effect, you would still deal more damage. So with the passive effect that you're using anyways, you're dishing out more DPS. You might think that you would still be able to deal more damage with Draining Dagger because it has less stamina consumption than Hemorrhage. So in a way you might be thinking, maybe I'm able to use one more poison pricks in my Injurious Insult sessions. I can only tell you I'm using Hemorrhage, and I don't really have a problem with this skill costing 40 stamina, because with the stamina management that I have, it's pretty easy for me to go with Hemorrhage and not run out of stamina that easily. So basically, if you have the question if you want to go for better stamina management or more DPS, you should definitely go for more DPS, because on the longer run, this skill will definitely be more beneficial. And as for Draining Dagger, you might be thinking, because of the passive effect, you have the dot ticking every second, while on Hemorrhage, you have the tick only every 2 seconds. So I can demonstrate you right now. There's one thing where Draining Dagger has the advantage, and that is that Draining Dagger is using the first dot already on the first second of this usage, as I can demonstrate you right now. When I use Hemorrhage now, I have the first tick of the dot after 2 seconds, and not straight away while utilizing the skill in the beginning. While with Draining Dagger, let's see, going to switch quick. So with Draining Dagger, you have the advantage that you have the first tick of your dot straight away, right in the beginning. But even with that aspect, you're still dealing more DPS overall with Hemorrhage on a longer run, that's for sure. Like I said, even without the passive effect. And now with the passive effect, you also have the 40% extra damage, which you get every time you remove the dot from the target. But here's the tricky little thing that you want to know about Hemorrhage that a lot of assassins probably didn't know, and some of you guys probably expect that it has way better utility than it actually has. Because what some of you assassins might think is that every time you use External Excruciation and then followed by Treacherous Aid and Explosive Pain, that you would get the 40% attack every time. And I'm going to demonstrate you right now that this is not the case. You're only getting the 40% bonus damage when you erase the dot from the target entirely. So I'm using Hemorrhage right now on the target, and then followed straight away, let's say, by Treasure's Aid. And now if you check the skill table, you have Hemorrhage over here. And don't get confused, hemorrhagic stroke is basically the dot skill itself, and hemorrhage is the passive effect. It's kind of weird, but that's the case. So we over here you can see that I have basically a count of 1 because, well, obviously I used Treasure's Aid one time, and actually the dot got removed entirely because I was not using Stoning Excruciation before. So I have this 1 count with the respective damage. And now I'm going to show you what happens if I use Hemorrhage and External Excruciation first, and then Treasure's Aid. So as you can see, the dot is still applied on the target, and now let's check. As you can see, there's no hemorrhage passive effect here. So again, you only get 40% bonus damage when you erase the target, the dot completely from the target. But even without this passive effect, you're still dealing more DPS compared to Draining Dagger. As I said before, I made this chart where you can basically see like you have like an exact comparison of both the dots and what respective damage to deal on each second. And in any regard, I can tell you that Hemorrhage was dealing more DPS. So you definitely want to go with this option if you want to go for more DPS on a longer run, and you, well, kind of don't want to take any more survivability, because in my opinion, life leech effects in this game are kind of useless because you should heal yourself with potions and scrolls anyways. Okay, so then another useful skill that I can cover is Mortalmire. I want to be honest, like damage-wise, it's not that significant. But one cool side effect this skill has, which is kind of handy for the assassin, is that when you use your passive dots, which is lethal combination and lethal application, and then you use Mortalmire on the target, as you can see, Mortalmire itself, I hope it will proc now, here you see it. As you can see, Mortalmire itself is able to proc both the dots. You can see I'm not doing anything, and both the passive dots are still applied on the target, which is really nice. So you want to use Mortalmire as much as possible. So basically, whenever it's off cooldown, you just refresh it to make sure that you have this passive element always like refreshing your passive dots on the target, which is really nice. On the next row, there's not much to cover. Then we go straight away or skip straight away to the Harsh Treatment passive. Why do you actually pick this? The answer is pretty simple. We have this skill over here, Tainted Edge, which is one of the more useless skills of the assassin, because as you can see, it's only dealing 69% of attack. And the only interesting thing about the skill that we want to have is the dot, because you know how the assassin works. With every dot you have, you're dealing more damage overall. So the only thing you want from this skill is the passive dot effect. The actual damage effect of 69% is not really significant and nothing interesting, because if you compare it straight away to Injurious Insult, one usage of Injurious Insult is already dealing more damage. It costs less stamina and has no cooldown, so there's basically no reason why you want to use Tainted Edge itself. So this is why you have the passive Harsh Treatment. So whenever you use Treasure's Aid, you have the dot effect of Tainted Edge applied anyways. So you basically come to the conclusion that Tainted Edge is one hell of a useless skill, because yeah, this is 30 stamina you definitely want to save for each rotation. So just take this skill out of your rotation, you don't have to use it. Another pretty useless skill, especially for the assassin, I know it's useful for the duelist, would be the wound. That's a very important skill for a duelist, because it's basically followed by a lot of the main duelist mechanics in a way. But for the assassin, it's completely trash. The only way I could see this being useful maybe would be if you use it in combination with Heartless Blow in your rotation, but it's a skill that I didn't even it didn't even skill in my skill build. So you also come to the conclusion that dewound is a completely useless skill for the assassin. You just don't want to use in your rotation, because it's 30 stamina totally wasted. Because if you compare it again to Injurious Insult, you deal basically 4% more damage. It costs less stamina, and this one has no cooldown. So again, just completely useless skill that you don't want to waste stamina on. Then, as I said in the video before, we have the skill charging slash. I told you in the, I think it was part 2, that crippling cut is the better option if you want to charge towards the boss. I will just display it one more time. So if you use crippling cut, you're not wasting any stamina in the beginning, so it's not interrupting or disturbing your rotation in a way. While when you use charging slash, you already waste 30 stamina of your resources, and that's 30 stamina you definitely want to take for a more useful skill in your rotation. So this is definitely also something you don't want to use. So overall, I try to use charging slash as less as possible. I try to use crippling cut more. I'm only using charging slash when I want to charge back to the boss, and I'm basically, or crippling cut is not off cooldown yet. So yeah. Then we have Devilish Dispersal. As I said in the video before, this is one of your more essential skills, because as how the assassin works is basically you stack all the dots on a target, and you want to make sure that you have the dots lasting as long as possible on your target. And by doing that, or trying to achieve that, you need skills such as Devilish Dispersal and Sadistic Search, so that you can make sure that you keep, or you reset the duration of the dots, and with that automatically make sure that you have the dot effects applied on the target as long as possible. Okay, so then on the next row, as I said also in the videos before, there's again the option between Ripped Raw and sapping Shuriken Mastery. This is also one of the more debatable things of the assassin skill tree, because there's basically one faction of assassins which is going with Ripped Raw, and then you have the other factions of assassins which are using sapping Shuriken. And again, this is more of like a preference kind of thing, because it's basically just a question if you want more damage or if you want to save some stamina. Because yeah, what Ripped Raw does is that you have a 50% chance of every use of Hemorrhage or Draining Dagger that you apply the dot of sapping Shuriken onto the target. But the thing is, I'm not a big fan of RNG factors, and I'm trying to keep the RNG factors of a class as small as possible, or try to completely erase them if possible, which you don't have with the assassin. But so yeah, in case of Ripped Raw and sapping Shuriken, I say no to the RNG factor, because knowing my luck, I will probably not or like never proc the passive effect anyways, and I might as well just use sapping Shuriken straight away, which I actually do in my rotation. So I went with the 20% bonus damage, which I get with this passive here, and also it's 20%, so it's not really like that low, if you will, and it's still quite significant, because 20% of sapping of my current sapping Shuriken with the stats that I have is around, let's say, 1.7k damage. So let's say after using sapping Shuriken 10 times, you already dealt like 17k more damage as you would with using Ripped Raw. So yeah, that's the simple reason why I went with sapping Shuriken. Then we have in the next row the interesting thing of Heartless Blow compared to Nerve Toxin. It could be an interesting skill, because as you can see, you're dealing 25% more damage if Tainted Edge is applied on the target. And this skill actually procs with every usage of the wounds or injurious insults. The downgrade of the skill, though, is that it's only used, or you can only use it when you reach 50% of the boss, while you have Nerve Toxin available straight from the beginning. And depending on how many mechanics and how much movement is required on the different boss battles, you might not be able to use Heartless Blow as much as you probably expect. So in a way, with Nerve Toxin, you have a safer, stable DPS, while Heartless Blow is kind of like a risky thing, if you will. It kind of really depends on your playstyle. I'm not saying that this skill is a wrong choice. It might actually be a very delicate and interesting skill to pick, but this totally depends on your playstyle, how you play your assassin. And then, of course, we have Eternal Excruciation. As I said, this is one of the more essential skills, if not probably the most essential skill of the assassin. So what I don't want to see in assassin skill builds is people using Heartless Blow and Nerve Toxin and completely left this one out. Like, I mean, come on guys, just use your common sense. Just by reading the description, you should know, wow, this is definitely something that I have to pick. Like, there's no way how you cannot skill this one. Because, again, I know some assassins who asked me before if they should go for Eternal Excruciation. I told them, yes, of course. Like, this is your most, or if not the most important thing that you want to use as the assassin. Because what it does is, once you use it or activate it, you have like this 5 seconds time frame of where dots are not removed from the target when you use Treacherous Aid or Explosive Pain. So you basically save a lot of time, you deal out a lot of DPS. So yes, it's the very essential skill in your rotation. In the next 2 row, I actually don't have to cover this. I covered this already in the previous video. Then in the next row as well, I actually only going to talk about lethal combination application and the respective passive. I actually told you guys that this is one of the major aspects of the assassin, or one of the more major mechanics. What I don't like about it though, and that's something that might ruin assassin for you. For like, if you haven't played assassin yet and you consider starting the class, I'm going to tell you straight away that assassin is very RNG heavy. So your DPS, even with the same rotation, can vary like between 3 or 4k, which is actually a lot, and that totally depends on how lucky you are with this specific passive. What this passive does is, with every usage of Treacherous Aid, you have a 50% chance of activating one of 3 random effects. So basically you have a 50% chance of activating a skill, and then there's another 33% chance of getting one of the desired poisons or poison effects. And what you have is the blue poison, which is another dot. I can't really demonstrate it right now because, as I said, it's completely RNG if you can proc it or not. Right now, I proc the orange one, which is 100% more stamina regeneration. So basically you have like double the stamina regeneration, which is pretty good. Once you proc the orange one, you can just go nuts on the target, and you're in a berserk mode, more or less, because you can just spam your skills and you're pretty much not running out of stamina. So the orange one is a passive poison effect that you definitely want to get as much as possible. The purple poison is also really nice. What it does is that it resets the cooldown of Treacherous Aid. So what it means is, once you use Treacherous Aid and you proc the poison one, okay, got the orange one again. But what will basically happen is that the cooldown of Treacherous Aid is reset straight away. So you could use Treacherous Aid several times in a row. Like, the highest count I managed to get was like 5 times in a row, and let me tell you, that's quite a nuke on the boss. Because once you have all the targets, the dots applied on the target, and then you use Treacherous Aid to remove all the dots, you have like this really huge damage, especially when it crits. So if you have like several purple poison effects in a row, so that you can use Treacherous Aid several times, you have like this really huge nuke of damage bashing on the boss, which is really nice. And then you have the blue poison effect, which is an additional dot, which is also pretty nice because, again, how the assassin works is that with every dot that you have applied on the target, you're dealing more damage with Treacherous Aid, Explosive Pain, and Poison Prick. And speaking of Poison Prick, that's the skill I will cover next. You basically have 135% of attack as damage whenever you use it. You use it whenever you use Injurious Insult 3 times. Sorry for the lag. So if you use it 3 times, you can activate Poison Prick by pressing Q. There's only a little time frame of when you can use Poison Prick. So if I use Injurious Insult another 3 times, you can see the stacks down here. I use it again, and then Poison Prick activates, and you have like this little buff in a way, which indicates how many seconds you have to use Poison Prick. So if you're not using it, the skill will just disappear, and you just wasted pretty much a lot of damage, because this is a pretty hard-hitting skill, if you will, especially with the passive, which is Poison Prick Mastery. What this passive does is that with every dot effect applied on the target, you're increasing the damage of Poison Prick by 20%. And with the scale build that I use, you basically have 9 possible dots in total. So that's an increasement of 180%, and you can really feel that, because sometimes Poison Prick, with the stats that I have, is critting like 24k, which is a lot. And it kind of like depends on how many poison pricks you're able to squeeze in one session before you have to reset the dots. So if you manage to use poison prick like 3 times, it's like 3 times 24k damage when crits, and that's a huge difference DPS wise. So that's definitely something you want to try to use as many times as possible. Yeah, Sadistic Surge I pretty much covered that before with Devilish Dispersal, but another thing you might want to consider is that when you use it, the dot effects are critting for 10 seconds, which is pretty nice. So normally during boss fights, I'm using Sadistic Surge before Devilish Dispersal because I want to make sure that I have the crit damage effect for 10 seconds during the burst phase while I use the T skill and all the different buffs that I have. So yeah, now we come to the ultimate, and I actually covered it already in the previous video, but I want to tell you guys exactly and again why I use this skill instead of Ghastly Gulp that probably 80% of all assassins are using, because they simply go with the skill build that they are used from, or that what they are familiar with from season 1. That's probably the reason why most of them use Ghastly Gulp. But I want to demonstrate you again why Reaping Rush is also a pretty cool skill also for the party, because again a lot of people are like, wow, this is like an ego ulti, and why would you use that? Why would you only want to buff your own damage? I'm going to tell you straight away. One of my intentions, of course, was to buff my own damage as well, because again, it's a dot effect, and with every dot effect that you use, you deal more damage overall with the assassin. So of course, this is one of the aspects why I chose to go with Reaping Rush. But the other thing where I cannot agree that this skill is an ego ulti is because of the yellow soul that you apply with the ultimate. Because what it does is it decreases the crit evasion on the target by, if I would have it on level 5, it would be 15%. So basically it's the same crit evasion decreasement that you would have on Ghastly Gulp. But now comes the tricky thing. You can use Reaping Rush as a dot effect, obviously. And since it's a dot, you can reset the dot 2 times with Sadistic Surge and Devilish Dispersal, which I'm doing anyways in my rotation, so I'm resetting it now with Sadistic Surge. I get another 10 seconds time frame of Reaping Rush, and before the dot expires one more time, I use Devilish Dispersal and reset it one more time and get another time frame of like 10 seconds. So in total, you're basically using the ultimate on the target for 30 seconds. And another thing is that you only have like half the time of the cooldown compared to Ghastly Gulp, because here it's 2 minutes, here it's only 60 seconds. So basically you kind of like have to make a comparison. On one side you have Ghastly Gulp with minus 15% crit evasion, which you also have with Reaping Rush. You have, of course, the minus 15% defense, which you don't have with Reaping Rush. But here the duration is only 25 seconds, considering you have the green soul skill applied on level 5. I definitely would use, like, if I would use Ghastly Gulp, I definitely would go with the green one and not the yellow one. I know that a lot of people are using the yellow one on Ghastly Gulp, which is not necessarily wrong, but I still prefer using the green one because of the simple reason. For example, if you are in a 20-man raid, and you have like a lot of different classes which are able to decrease the crit evasion of the target or of the raid boss. So basically, you want to use more duration instead of more crit evasion to decrease, because you have the crit evasion decreased to a certain extent anyways because of all the different classes that you have in a 20-man raid. So for a raid, you definitely want to go with the green soul applied on it, because I rather want to have a longer duration to make a longer usage of Ghastly Gulp instead of going with more crit evasion to decrease, which is kind of useless. But back to Reaping Rush. So again, we have the comparison. We have the minus 15% crit evasion, which we also have with Reaping Rush once it's level 5. We have the minus 15% defense reduction, which we don't have with Reaping Rush, but again, here it's only a duration of 25 seconds with the green soul level 5 and a cooldown of 2 minutes, while here it's 30 seconds duration, of the debuff and only 1 minute cooldown. So in a way you have like 30 seconds the debuff, then 30 seconds break, 30 seconds the debuff again, 30 seconds break, and here you have the debuff, well, only for 25 seconds, which is still a lot, but you have the cooldown of 2 minutes. So there's basically a time window of 1 minute and 35 seconds where nothing happens. And another advantage that you have with Reaping Rush is that Reaping Rush and Ghastly Gulp stack. Reaping Rush and Reaping Rush stacks, so if you have 2 assassins in your raid and both use Reaping Rush, you would have a total of minus 30% crit evasion on the target, while Ghastly Gulp and Ghastly Gulp don't stack. So if you have 2 assassins with Ghastly Gulp, they in most cases they're just taking turns with the Ghastly Gulp usages. But in my opinion, you rather want the concentrated crit evasion decreasement during the burst phase where everyone is using their red soul skill and their buffs and whatnot. So in a way, I would say having 2 assassins with Reaping Rush, even in a raid, is almost more beneficial than having 2 assassins with Ghastly Gulp. But then again, it's kind of like more of a preference kind of thing. I'm not saying that Ghastly Gulp is a wrong choice, but I'm going with Reaping Rush because, first of all, yes, it's increasing my own DPS, but this skill is definitely not an ego ultimate. So, because of the yellow passive effect that you have applied. And as I said in the previous video, that whenever I'm playing a class in MMO, I try to squeeze as basically the most DPS potential that I can get. So in a way, it's kind of like legitimate that I go with Reaping Rush and basically build the skill tree as I seem fit, or where I would say, yes, this is definitely the build that I want to go for if I want to squeeze out as much DPS that I can get. So yeah, that was pretty much everything I wanted to cover in this video regarding all the little tricks and tweaks of all the different skills and some information you might not know. If you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comment section. If you want to see more future videos regarding the assassin, just maybe I can make a PvP rotation, a PvP build in the future. If you want that covered, I can do that as well. But till then, see you guys, and have a nice night.